is not a biblical value. It's almost an un-American thought. I mean, it's enshrined in our Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I rest my case. But happiness was never anything Jesus sought or encouraged us to seek. Sometimes we try to remind ourselves that true happiness can't be bought in material things. Money can't buy happiness. But then our thinking evolved. For everything else, there's MasterCard. One dictionary definition of happiness is a state of well-being, a pleasurable or satisfying experience. The word rejoice, on the other hand, from which our word joy comes, can mean to feel great delight, to welcome, or to be glad. Now, depending on the translation of the Bible you're using, the words happy and happiness appear about 30 times. Joy and rejoice, over 300. Now, peace. That is a biblical value. Indeed, the child whose birth we await is called the Prince of Peace. He's called the King of Kings, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father. Royal children have fancy titles that foreshadow their fate-filled life to come. But who there, back then, when this child was born and as that child grew up, who would have imagined that the man who was bestowed with such powerful monikers would never raise a hand against another person, let alone something like a sword, would forbid his followers to even protect him? This night that is quickly approaching, O holy night, is the starting point for a story that defies all explanation, seems utterly illogical, and inverses the properties of nature and the sensibilities of our civilized, uncivilized species. It thoroughly repudiates the notion that might makes right. It thoroughly rejects self-serving, even self-preservation. The only self it speaks of is self-sacrifice. It makes a mockery of ego and even fairness, because it seems only fair to hate those who hate you. It seems only fair to strike the cheek of someone who strikes your cheek. I was thinking about this. In a way, Jesus never grew up. Jesus never grew up because he remained as gentle as that baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. And the peace he brought was not something we understood. It wasn't won in a battle against the Romans, as everyone would hope the Messiah would do, but won by removing in us hearts of stone and giving us hearts of flesh. He did not win by conquering, he won by inviting us to compassion, unfathomable compassion. And that's why it doesn't make sense. We certainly know that. The Apostle Paul knew that when he wrote to his beloved Philippians. He says, "The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding." Paul has found a peace that is rare for us in our contemporary world. He says he's learned to be content with whatever I have, while we're taught to be content with nothing that we have. We're only content wanting more. And We are only content with yearning. In fact, much of our economy is dependent on keeping us discontent with everything we have, longing endlessly for something better and newer to meet a need we didn't even know existed until we saw an ad for something that would fix it. Peace that surpasses all understanding. I wondered this week, do we want peace as much as we want better technology? What if all the hours and resources dedicated to the next line of iPhones was dedicated to fostering peace? What if all the high-powered, high-paid workforce that has flooded the Bay Area had come here to seek peace? Christianity makes no sense. It didn't then. It doesn't now. In 2018, a lot of people, upon meeting Jesus, would deride his seeming lack of manhood more than praise any sense of divinity. Now, I did want to say, Paul, as Steve mentioned, wrote this letter to a church he had clearly grown very fond of. And he was worried about the strains on the church, both from a hostile world outside, but also by some strains inside the church. And he urges Euodia. Steve and I were like, Steve found 5 pronunciations for these names. And Syntyche. To be of the same mind in the Lord. This is the same phrase that Paul uses in other letters when he refers to disagreement among church letters. But really, I have to say, I mention this mostly because it is so rare for one, let alone 2 women, to be named, let alone leaders of the church to be recognized. They have struggled beside me, Paul writes, in the work of the gospel. So they aren't the focus of my thoughts today, but I feel we must always pay respect and call attention to any place in the New Testament where the lives and the work of women has not been lost. And so I bring them to our attention and say their names to honor all the women who worked for the gospel whom we do not know. But earlier this week, getting back to peace, I wanted to say I was with a group of fellow clergy and we were reading from Colossians. And that's another letter of Paul's. And he says, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, forgive each other, you must forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. And if we have a roadmap, if we have a formula to come into this peace that surpasses understanding, this may be a good map. Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another. Forgive. There are 2 paths. And we here travel both of them. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. But when we leave that path of God's peace that surpasses all understanding, that path that calls us to radical love, that path of the gentle prince, the kind king, let us wear the love of God as Christ did. Let us clothe ourselves in God's peace wherever we are. And finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And may the peace of Christ be with you always. Will you please pray with me? O gentle and peaceful God, we come close to this particular night when we will gather again to sing in joy your entrance to the human condition. And we pray that in these last few days of our Advent, of our waiting, you help us prepare to contemplate and to practice your peace, your love,